Welcome to It's Not What You Think, episode 28, recorded on September 29th, 2021. Dr. David Lechuga has been training in Shotokan Karate since 1978. Mr. Oshima, one of the few living martial arts masters in the world, awarded Dave his first degree black belt in 1983, and 23 years later, in 2006, Mr. Oshima awarded him Godan ranking, or fifth degree black belt. This is the highest rank awarded in Shotokan Karate of America and Shotokan Oshima dojos around the world. Dr. Lachuga is also a psychologist and the director of the Neurobehavioral Clinic and Counseling Center, servicing individuals with learning, cognitive, and behavioral challenges, including brain-injured adolescents and adults. He also serves as the sports neuropsychology consultant for professional and amateur teams, including the LA Kings, LA Football Club, LA Galaxy, and Concordia University. It's Not What You Think podcast is available on YouTube and Spotify. When you like, comment, share, or subscribe, it means a lot to us, more than you know. That support helps us to produce this show. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from yours or mine. So while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. So hi, Dave. Welcome to It's Not What You Think. How is your week 79,000 in the pandemic? How's that going?
So far, okay. Amazing. Just acclimating to this new reality.
It's like every few months there's a new reality.
Right. Yeah. Keeps it refreshing that way.
Yeah, keeps you on your toes. Like, this new reality is different than the new reality from three months ago.
That's right.
So I'll just get right out there with the easy stuff. Do you remember your first karate class?
I do. It was actually, it was not in our organization. It was my first semester at Cal State Long Beach, and I took this class. Actually, no, I stand corrected. My first class was with Don Dupree.
Wow.
So it was at Long Beach State, and it was my first semester there. Just graduated from high school, and I was planning to go in the military after the first semester. I had a delayed enlistment for January 2nd, 1976. And so I took this class, and I remember seeing the name in the course listing, the catalog. And I said Dupree, D-E capital P, R-E-E, no space between E and capital P. And so I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe this is French guy and take this class. And yeah, so I took the class with Don Dupree, and it was tough. It's a tough class. I'd never taken a martial art before, and Don was a Sandan or New Yodan then. And,
third or fourth degree black belt.
Right. And he didn't speak, seemed to me like he didn't speak a lick of English the entire class, when of course he probably did. But we even had a special training practice at the end of the class. I thought, man, this is tough. And I played sports in high school, and Don was in his peak. He was still fighting a little bit, or he just retired as a fighter. So yeah, it really stayed with me all through basic training and my military. And it motivated me to continue to have some training while I was in the military on my own. And then it influenced my decision to go back to that college after I was discharged.
Wow. So what a huge impact Don had on you, or at least that practice?
Well, I liked the intensity. Don was unique in that he brought a certain level of intensity, and there was a feeling of lethality to him. Don he was a very dangerous fighter, and he had a moment of violence that wasn't just one thing. It was a prolonged moment of violence where he would sweep somebody, hit them. If they got up, he'd hit them again. If they looked down, he'd hit you again. And he was just a dominant fighter. So that really stayed in my mind when I was going through basic training. I thought, none of these training instructors or drill instructors had a thing on Don Dupree. He'd wipe them all out, all of them, easy. Probably take 3 or 4 at one time. So that really motivated me to come back and go to that particular college again.
So you knew it was the real deal. When you were done with that first class, was there any thought like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Or were you like, yeah, no problem?
Well, it wasn't no problem. It was fear. I had fear. but I thought this is really unique. This is unique. And then Don would keep mentioning his instructor, Mr. Oshima, Tsutomu Oshima. And Mr. Oshima would come and visit, but he would visit the karate club. And I wasn't in the club, I was in a PE class.
Right.
And I started in the club when I came back from Long Beach, from the military, when I was in the Air Force.
So what's interesting is I had the similar experience. I started in University of Chicago in 79. And same thing, a guy that led the class, Jay Abrams, Nidan at the time, a second degree black belt. And I didn't know what I was getting into.
Right.
And I remember getting into the first 10 or 15 minutes. He said a few weeks before, he says, "Hey, do you want to join this club? I'm starting a club, karate." I said, "Sure. How much is it?" "Oh, it's free." I was at University of Chicago. And then, and I'm thinking, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So I'm thinking, from Brooklyn, what's this guy got?
Yeah, right.
Not that I knew much about fighting, but I guess in my mind, I thought, and I remember about 10, 15 minutes into class. And well, first we did the meditation on our knees, of course. And I'm like, wow, how long is this going on for? And then I'm 10 or 15 minutes into class. There's not a lot of talking. And I'm thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through. I remember I'm 10 or 15, and I think, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. This is hard. And, and of course it was a 2-hour class, and what was interesting for me, and there was the whole fear factor as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but almost no speaking at all.
Right.
Just a few, just a little Japanese here and there, which I didn't really know. And, but I remember vividly a couple of hours after class thinking, I'm clear. I'm very clear. I actually feel happy. At the time, this is 40 plus years ago, I was clearly not a happy person. And I feel like whatever box I had around me, I no longer had it. I didn't even know I had a box, you know what I mean? Sometimes you don't know what you got until until it's gone. So in this way, so I said, I got to come back. And then second class, same thing. I said, what am I doing here? But then I've all done, got to come back. Anyways, so do you remember the first time you met Mr. Oshima?
I do. I met him after I was, back at Long Beach State, which is where I took the first class with Don Dupree. And we had a club then, a karate club. There were 60 people in the club. And I was a white belt, new white belt. And at the end of the semester of training, Mr. Oshima would always come and visit. And so I remember meeting him, and we would contribute money and then give him a gift. And that time was a pen, a nice pen. So I remember meeting him and didn't really get a feel for him, except, I was in awe of him, and he was clearly in his prime as a martial artist when I saw him, and like mid to late 40s. And then I didn't really get a feel for him until I went to special training, my first special training, and he led all special trainings then. So I really got a good feel for him then.
So before we talk about that, many people, probably most of the people that are watching this podcast, will have no idea who Mr. Oshima is or Shotokan Karate. So can you give us, a brief synopsis of, what is Shotokan Karate? Who is Mr. Oshima?
Sure. So Tsutomu Oshima is a direct student of Gichin Funakoshi. Master Gichin Funakoshi is the originator of Shotokan Karate. And he originally was influenced by Okinawan masters, Chinese masters in Okinawa. And then he was invited in 1911 and 1922 to give a demonstration in Tokyo, which he did, and began teaching at Waseda University after that second demonstration, not exactly sure when. Tsutomu Oshima, Mr. Oshima, encountered him at Waseda University in Tokyo in the karate club there, became his student, and was basically taught by him while he was a student and eventually the captain of the Waseda Karate Club. After Master Funakoshi's death, I think it was 1957, Master Funakoshi's family asked Mr. Oshima to bring Shotokan Karate to the United States, which he did. Started teaching here in the mid-1950s and mid to late 1950s in the 60s at judo location in Little Tokyo, and then eventually at then Marino, where a lot of our senior members began practicing with sensei. He taught Japanese. I talked with one of his students who didn't train with him, but was just a student in one of his classes. And he, for punishment, he would put these elementary school, Catholic school students in a horse stance with a book over their head, if they did not do their homework and stuff. And so that's Tsutomu Oshima, and he is now he was a Shihan up until just recently of Shotokan Karate of America, also known as Oshima Shotokan. And until recently, he was the Shihan until he kind of stepped back. And then Mr. Sagawa assumed that role. Shihan is a head instructor over an organization. And then now it's Mr. John Teramoto, who's the Shihan, all Godans.
And what would you say makes SKA, or from your perspective, or Shotokan Karate or Oshima Karate unique versus the other dozens, if not hundreds, of martial arts karate schools?
Well, like every martial art, the instruction makes that particular genre unique. So Mr. Oshima is probably one of the top martial artists ever. And I don't know if anyone has actually ever been better than him. I don't know, but he reminds me of someone who comes around every 5 to 10 generations. And so his instruction was highly unique. And then his direct students, like Don Dupree, one of his early Yodans, was very unique. These are human beings that first and foremost strive to be a good human being. And then also at the same time, a top martial artist. And that requires a lot of sacrifice. There's no gimmicks, nothing fancy. It's just you train and you face yourself. And Oshima Sensei would always ask us as his black belts and as his senior black belts to have a balanced life. He used the ox cart analogy, where an ox cart, 2 wheels. If you're just a strong martial artist, you have 1 wheel. If you don't have the academic preparation or the professional level at the same level as your martial art, then you're unbalanced, and vice versa. So he wanted both from you, and implicitly demanded that from you.
Yeah, I remember starting out when I started out back then as well. The leader of the club, Nidan, a second degree black belt, he'd say, "Yeah, Mr. Oshima does not really encourage people to start their own dojo, commercial dojo, because there's nothing wrong with it, and there's certainly some great ones out there, like the Bronx, which I practiced for a while. They're phenomenal, but he really wanted people to bring this whole mentality into the world." Mm-hmm. And have people model what he was teaching, so colleagues and friends and social, whatever, they can pick. That's how they would pick it up, as opposed to being in your own dojo. So similar, I think, to what you're saying.
Yeah, I would think it's been a bit more modified than that. In that Sensei is picky about who starts a dojo. You have to ask him, and you have to be really a sanda before you start your dojo. Although he'll grant permission, but you have to get his permission. And at least in those days, to start a dojo. And then, your students really show what kind of instructor you are, and that reflects on sensei. So we have to keep that in mind when we teach.
For sure. One of the unique aspects of Shotokan Karate or Oshima Karate is the concept of special training. Which I think other groups have taken that on now, which is wonderful. You want to talk a little bit about special training? I don't know why I always laugh when I ask that question.
Sure. Well, it's something to be experienced, and like Sensei has said, if you go to only one special training, it's changed you. And it's I think most individuals that are in good shape get through a special training fine, but it's a mentality. What's nice is that it has a no quit mentality. So if you leave special training, you're forever barred from our organization. And I've been in several situations where people have opted to leave and they were not allowed to continue training with us. This is a basic yes, no, very binary type of expectation, which I liked. And second is a camaraderie. You have, as you know, multiple practices. They're meant for everybody to undergo and pass through successfully. But you should have multiple opportunities to just face yourself and get a sense of how are you doing now that you're tired, now that you're hurt, now that you're afraid. how are you going to face that, and how do you deal with that?
Right. So it's a lot of practices.
Mm-hmm.
Some almost back to back, some almost 24/7 for several days on, starting at wake up calls, 5:30 in the morning. I'm just giving a little background for those that,
Yes.
and potentially there might be a midnight practice as well. So, if, you might go to sleep at 1:32, get up again 3 or 4 hours and just do that for 3, 4 days in a row, potentially up to, 5 or 6 days, depending on the special training, and pushing yourself beyond your perceived limits.
Right. Right.
I think that that's also a very special, unique aspect of what we do.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, and actually, so that was actually the first place I met Mr. Oshima as well, was at special training.
Nice.
And I don't think I told this story yet, but at the first practice, I was not the last person running. You know why? Because he was behind me.
He's behind you, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And encouraging me and all that. And I'm like, who's this guy? I mean, I kind of knew who it was, but I didn't really know. You grew up in California, so you had a better sense. I was in Chicago at the time, and I'd had, I think, 6 or 7 months under my belt. But that's when I met Mr. Oshima the first time. So, anyways, so, at a 50,000 foot level, the way I would look at martial arts or Eastern arts is about polishing the mind. Yes, it's about punching and kicking and all that, but it's really, I think, more about, removing mental blocks, becoming free, or I don't want to say happy, becoming free or liberated from mental blocks. So, so even things like the tea ceremony or flower arrangement or Tai Chi, it's all the similar goal, if we want to use that word, goal. So I know you earned your PhD in psychology in 1985. 2 years after you got your first degree black belt. So now you've got the whole Western, mentality thing going on academically or whatever clinical you were doing. And you've got the whole Eastern thing as well. So, and both journeys are clearly about the mind. Did you initially spend a lot of time trying to integrate, or because they're very different approaches, and now they're probably more similar than they were back then.
Right. Well, I don't think I thought too much about it. I was training, and I was at UCLA, and so I went to UCLA because, although I was accepted at different universities across the country, in fact, the University of Minnesota was my first choice. I went to UCLA. UCLA, I thought I would never get into. It's just the top school in the nation for my particular area, but it was accepted, and I opted to go there because it was 11 miles from Melrose Dojo, so Mr. Oshima's dojo. So I could ride my bicycle or catch a bus or get public transportation to the dojo, like when he taught Friday night and he taught Sunday. He had black belt practice, he had brown belt practice. So I went every chance I could to practice as sensei. And he knew I was in graduate school, and I didn't say too much. He would just kind of look at me at times. And there are times when I, once a week, the first year in particular, I'd have to do an all-nighter to just stay up with things. And then certainly during internship and times when you are a bit busier clinically and doing your dissertation, it's times when you don't sleep as much. But I would keep my training up, and he would just come up and say, you need to eat more, you need to sleep more. I didn't know, I didn't even notice that. And then some days he would come up and say, okay, David, you're good today. Mainly I was rested.
Right.
But I just did it, and it influenced me and influenced how I do psychotherapy, how I approach things. But it took me a while to internalize that, and not so much to just use a construct from a martial art to illustrate something in a kind of a hyper intellectual way, but it's more you as a presence. You're the tool. You're the feeling that a patient picks up. And if you have that kind of sincerity about you, not the hyper intellectual, romanticize every word type approach, then people pick that up as you're a genuine human being. And that's where I think things began to merge for me, where I wasn't just about one particular theoretical orientation. I was more about blending that, internalizing that, and how I work with people in a genuine way.
And becoming that model. So
Just
patience or
becoming an example. No,
right.
no, nothing idealistic about it.
Hmm.
Nothing haughty. Just becoming an example and trying to do the best.
Absolutely. So, I know as Buddhism became more popular in the West in the 70s and the 80s, the Dalai Lama came and Zen Buddhism started growing really more in the 60s. So, and some of the core of what we do in Japanese karate is of course related to Zen Buddhism. And in addition to attracting many spiritual seekers, Buddhism also attracted a lot of people who had psychological issues.
Mm,
It still does. People with
right.
trauma,
Sure.
anxiety,
Sure.
depression, PTSD, et cetera, et cetera. And I know for a period of time there was the thought that meditation, can solve all mental problems, which is a nice thought, but maybe not quite true. So, and what I understand from the last few years, there's a realization from a Buddhist perspective that that's not the case, and that there's a good melding of Western and Eastern approaches can work as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say just generally, martial arts is not a religion, and it's certainly influenced by Shintoism, Buddhism. If you kind of go back to Bodhidharma and the initial origins of the martial art with the Shaolin monks. So certainly there's a faith, a belief system that's kind of paired up with a combat art. Um, the mindfulness work that has been fashionable over the last 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years in my field, is an outgrowth of some of the Eastern thought. But I think it's a little bit misperceived as representative of a particular area. Mindfulness, meditative approaches are from all cultures in all different parts of the world. It's just a matter of it's just a matter of how has that been used to enhance a person's adjustment to their life situation. So it's fashionable, all that, but it still comes down to how do you live your life? You can meditate, you can go to therapy, you can do all that, but how do you live your life? How do you adjust to your reality? And how do you take care of your bad habits? That Sensei would tell us, look, it's better to get rid of one bad habit than to accrue 10 or 100 good habits. But how do you get rid of your bad habits, which is kind of tied into more of a martial artist perspective, more of a warrior perspective, facing yourself because you need to take care of that, given that there might be a situation where that bad habit is really going to hurt you and other people. So you need to face that and take care of it.
You mentioned mindfulness, and I know that from a lot, there's also a lot of good that's being done. Certainly, the last 5 or 10 years, as like you
Mhm.
said, I like the word fashionable, but my understanding, I've reading a lot of critique about it as well, and of course, there's probably somewhere in the middle, which is mindfulness is great, but it may not be teaching ethics. It may not be teaching compassion.
Mm.
It's really focused, so you can train a sniper, with mindfulness training, and he'll just be a better sniper. He'll be calmer, he'll be more relaxed, but he may not have some other positive qualities that he or she's picking up. And I see this kind of bandied about, and of course, mostly from extreme perspectives. And I know there's probably a balance somewhere. Does that come up at all when you're from a mindfulness perspective, the good part of it, the bad part of it, the critique?
Well, I know in combat situations, I know you're taught a 4 breath drill, like before things kind of hit the fan. Um, take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, combat breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of get your stuff together and your sphincters all tightened up before things go sideways. Same in a martial art. We're martial artists, warrior training, and always like that. It's a leading edge is development from a martial artist perspective. And the mindfulness serves you to calm yourself in situations that are difficult. It doesn't judge. It doesn't put a valence, positive or negative. It doesn't train you to do anything but if you practice karate do, a way of karate, then there's only one question that Sensei would say we should answer at the end of our lives. And as you're exhaling your breath, you ask yourself, did I try to be the best human being possible for me? Was I a good human being? And if you exhale and can say yes, okay, the life was all right. That's the goal. And whatever path gets you there, okay. But the goal is to be, sure, our path is to be a martial artist, but this path of being a good human being, ultimately.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Well said. I mentioned in the introduction to the podcast that you do a lot of work with professional athletes, LA Kings, LA Football Club, LA Galaxy, and also Concordia University. What kind of work do you do with them, relative to, these people that are at the top of their profession in some sense in the world?
Well, I'm a neuropsychologist, and my subspecialty is working with sports concussions. So my background in training professionally is really to evaluate someone who sustained an injury to the brain. A concussion may cause more of a minor injury that's transient, but we have protocols in place based on our understanding of concussions or mild traumatic brain injuries. And the protocols really tell us that individuals, in this case athletes, who sustain concussions have to go through a certain progression of recovery before they're safe to return to play. Absent that progression, they're more at risk for sustaining longer term effects from repeat concussions or concussions that have not fully healed. So I'm part of that concussion management protocol. I'm really the second to the last step, where I will evaluate somebody and compare them to their preseason baseline. We get baseline on each athlete and their cognitive skills, being certain measures that look at attention, memory, and speed of processing. Those are the cardinal signs of concussion. And then compare them when they're clear to be compared. That's usually when you can push them for 45 minutes, get their heart rate upwards of 135 beats per minute. And they have no symptoms of concussion, then I can re-examine them once they're rested. And if they're at baseline, then I give a green light to the medical director, who then often gives a green light to return to practice, conditioning, and play. And we know that that's the safest science-based approach, evidence-based approach right now to maintain the safety of athletes who have sustained concussions while playing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Makes sense. I'm going to go back a little bit. So, as I mentioned, I think in both of us had the experience in our first karate class. Not a lot of English going on. Not a lot of work. Not a lot of verbal instruction.
Right.
And hundreds of techniques, thousands of techniques, and maybe there's a couple of words in there. Start, stop. Relax, that kind of thing. And I think in that regard, it was very Japanese, very traditional, because there's just so much you can communicate with words. It's all about doing and experiencing.
Right.
And certainly that was attractive, very attractive to me. I didn't know it at the time, but that brought me back. If my teacher had sat there for a half hour and talked, I wouldn't have felt the same authenticity. And I think that may have changed in the last few years, at least from my experience. I'm on the other side of the coin of no longer a beginner in that regard, at least in the United States, where there's more verbalization, at least in the karate, in the Shotokan Karate classes. Have you seen that? Do you agree with that? Do you feel like, the old school was better, or this is more of an evolved way? I will say that before I say what I think, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it really depends on the context. For example, a Sunday practice with Sensei, he said, this is a saloon. He would say a saloon where we can, even while stretching, he would set the tone by being informal, or if someone was stiff, he would say, James stayed up and he drank too much last night. I can tell he's very stiff now. Or he drank white wine instead of red wine. He would, but the atmosphere was one of levity, not so much levity. There was seriousness when we trained, but at other times there was just strictness for sure. But the context depends. But I would say that it really depends on the instructor too. Some instructors like to hear themselves talk. They think they have insight into a martial art tenet or belief. And they may, but my experience, very few do. Very few do. There's only, like in anything, there's only an upper 2%, upper 1%. And that's the same in martial arts, the same with Godans. So I think it's not old school, it's just school. And the high level instructors say very little. And they may chastise actually more than, support in some kind of Western approach when we used to always say, good job to the kids and you rock. And we don't do that. It's about being strict. But the weakness in the Western approach to teaching is hyperverbal, kind of being loquacious, because you think you have an understanding of something when all you need to do is look at somebody's ozuki and you say, Gyakuzuki, kata. Why are we so strict at grading? Because someone has to embody and show what sensei has tried to teach. And you can see that right away when you have somebody do their kata. All of us have weaknesses in our kata, but you can see right away. And that person can't, by definition. So I'm very clear. When I teach. Not that I'm any better than anybody else, but you're going to train, you're going to sweat, you're going to practice. If you want to practice it that way, great. If not, okay, that's fine. No need to apologize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the real learning goes on in the doing, as opposed and the experiencing it, and then seeing the teacher doing the same thing. But
you have to watch. You have to watch the instructor, and you teach. The students should learn by watching the instructor's back. That's the way Sensei would always tell us. Don't show too much of your teeth, smiling all the time. He would get on us at special training because around Nidan, people feel pretty good. They've had the 10 to 12 special trainings. They laugh. He says, that's very dangerous. The juniors see that and they think this is the kind of a celebration, a festival. Mm-hmm. Be really careful. That's dangerous for them to see. You have to be extremely strict and serious, during the practice.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So one of my favorite topics in this podcast is fear, which you mentioned earlier. And when I started in 79, there was a lot of fear, at least for me. I haven't really talked too much with other people about it, probably only recently. Fear before class, fear before special training. During class or during special training, I didn't really feel fear. I don't know if that's common or normal or whatever. I was just doing it. And once I was in, I was in. I wasn't like, I just did what you got to do.
Right.
But I remember a lot of anxiety. That's probably a better word for psychologist than, before classes and before special training. I think it was the mind's illusory expectation of what might happen in the future. And I think it was also promoted a lot with stories that the seniors would tell about, and so-and-so, especially Don Dupree stories. You probably heard a ton of them. So how was that for you when you first started? And how do you feel about that as a motivator for students?
Right. Well, it's an honest reaction. I mean, I would get sick to my stomach before every practice at Paramount Dojo, which is where, I started training with Don outside of the college setting. He had his dojo in Paramount, which is not too far from where I lived. But I get sick to my stomach because they were all top fighters. I mean, Paramount Dojo is known for Kumite and Greg Scott, Tom Mazzilla, Don Dupree, all these seniors. I was a white belt and I pretty much get wiped out every practice. Teeth loose, black eye, ribs fractured here or there. And you face Don Dupree in one-time engagement. And he jumped in the line. And so I would feel fear of being hurt. But I also felt determination. And that's where it flips. Like, I'm not gonna back down. No way. And so you struggle with that, but I'd get sick to my stomach each time. And I remember really admiring someone who was smaller, maybe not athletic. And I would take strength from them. So I thought, this person's coming in here, 5'2", maybe 95 pounds, and dealing with this. And I thought, I have no excuse. But I still get sick to my stomach for every class until I kind of settled in a bit.
Yeah. I think doing it a lot and the fear, you can't just go once a week and, fear's always there. But I think the more I practiced consistently, it made a big difference.
Yeah.
And not to compare at all my experience with yours, because I think you were doing that as a white belt. But as a black belt, I used to go train up in the Bronx.
Oh, yeah.
And there was, and they called Friday night, they called it Friday Night Fights. And they called it that for a reason. Right. So
Yeah, I fought a few of those guys.
Yeah, yeah. So, outstanding martial artists and great
Right.
fighters, and I'm a better person for it. So thank you to them. Um, so, my practice has changed drastically
Yeah. Good.
as I'm older.
Yes. Good.
I don't know if you could tell, but I'm going to be 98 next week. So it's
All
all the
right.
karate, it's all the tai chi. No, so I'm
Right.
in my 63 or so,
Yeah.
and so, any thoughts on, and I know, Master Funakoshi says, oh, it's important karate can be practiced by the young and the old, and
Yeah.
that's true. Any thoughts on how your practice has
Mm.
changed, or what can you advise, older practitioners?
Well, I really like continuing to practice as I've gotten older. I'm 64, and the practice changes a bit away from like 20s, 30s, even early 40s, from more the jukumite or kumite aspect. I think that's kind of a immature stage to go through. It's not to be judged in a way. It's just a stage you go through. Even immature, mature is a bit of a judgment, but it's a stage you go through. And then you move through that and learn, just like in progression, as we go through the dans, you learn other aspects that are incorporated into promotion and dantes. But kata is essential. And I think as we get older, takes a central role for how we practice. And then how you do kata can't be like a 25-year-old guy. It has to be like where you are, which is a challenge, because it takes a while for our mind to catch up to our body, or vice versa. But kata is essential, and then you can still do kihon and you can still do kumite, but it all has to be clear, correct technically, the right feeling, and matched, chronologically, which is tough to do. But Sensei is always honest about, you don't do kata as a 25-year-old man, you're 55, So he's always good about showing how to continue to be strict, but shifting more toward kata. Even since, Master Funakoshi would do hand kata, when he was older. And, he died early 80s, but practiced hand kata. And, so I just kind of adjust more toward kata.
Mm-hmm.
I still do other things, still teach, obviously, but still practice my kata primarily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So what popped into my mind while you were speaking was, at special training, as you know, when we do certain, like we sit in a horse stance for
Yep.
an hour, or hour and a half, excuse me. It was very painful,
Yes.
and without getting into the details of that. But those who were over 40
Mm.
got to do it for an hour, and I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, those guys are old. Wow, I
Right.
can't believe they only have to do an hour. Yeah, but look how old they are."
Right.
Now I'm like, okay, I get it. Anyways, so yeah, so thanks for sharing that with me, because it's difficult, because you on some level I want to do what I did last year, 2 years ago, but on another level, when I do that, I tend to get hurt,
Yeah. Right.
or recovery is a lot longer.
Right.
So so it's really finding the balance at whatever age you're at, I think, is probably what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. You find that balance, and it's just important to continue to practice if you want to continue to improve. But we cannot judge someone who says, look, I've had enough, or my body won't allow me to go forward. Then you make an adjustment, and you can take that mentality into something else. It's okay. No judgment.
Right,
Really
right.
never a judgment.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to change gears a bit here. So do you believe in God or a higher being?
I don't know.
I told you the easy questions came first.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not agnostic, but I'm not sure. Really, I'm less inclined to believe there's a single entity, but that's just my, background. I was raised Catholic. I was actually in the seminary for a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
until I discovered that celibacy wasn't a path for me, and I think I want to go in a different direction. But I've always been, I always feel, I have a wish that there is something higher out there, kind of looking out. It's more like a paternalistic wish. I have no judgment of individuals that carry those beliefs, but I feel more connected to the spirituality of everyone. And I don't have like deities that I worship or anything, but like this morning, I was out in the ocean paddling, and do outrigger paddling, and about a mile offshore, no one else around. Um, sun had come up, swells were going, and I really feel connected to the earth. I'm part Native American, so I'm more connected to that. Um, and religion is personal for everybody. I think it has to be your choice and it has to feel congruent with who you are. I feel more connected to everything. And to me, if there is a God, it's that sense of connection that I have with other people and with the world. I heard a Jesuit priest describe this one time, and it's that sense of connection that convinced someone who was dying, who had that question, is there a God, before he passed away? And he said, well, do you remember fishing on this lake in Wisconsin and you saw the sun come up? Yeah. Okay. Do you remember being over this mountain? He gave, the classic description of beautiful natural phenomena as a way to illustrate God. And that worked for that person who was dying. But I think there's some magic there. I think that Jesuit priest had some understanding of what a deity might look like, but I really don't know. And I'm not too pained by it.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing those experiences. And my personal feelings, I agree. Those feelings for me exhibit, that sense of something higher than me, greater than me. God, we can use the word God, we can use the word higher being, whatever words you want to use. They're not going to be able to describe it, but that feeling is enough to say,
yeah, there's something.
There's something, and I'm a part of it, but I'm not at the top of the food chain here, So,
Right. Yeah,
there's but I think you described it better than that. So, last hard question, and then one or two little questions left. So, when as I'm getting older, I'm thinking more and more about, how many more years do I have? Never thought about that in my 20s, 30s, 40s, because I was going to live forever.
Yeah.
Or so I thought, because I didn't think about it. And now that I'm thinking about it, mortality, things like that, I think like, okay, what happens when I pass from this life? Where do I go? Where, is some people, well, I'm not going to tell you what, of course, many people have different opinions of that. What's your opinion on that when it's time for you to go, where your spirit or your soul may go?
Right. I don't know. I really don't know. Have no idea. I think there are entities that continue to exist afterward. I've had some experiences with that, but I really don't know beyond that. And I know there's no real reaching back on a continual basis, as if there's a reaching back or forward. We may be forward, they may be back. It really doesn't know, but I just don't know. And so I'm really can only deal with this life and doing the best I can with this life. Whatever happens after I die is really, it just happens. My concern is that when I die, that I have done enough for my family so that they can continue and they don't feel too much pain about that. I really don't want them to feel too much pain or grief. I want them to be able to move through that without a lot of pain.
Got it. Okay, last question. So from all of your experience, what advice do you have for people watching this video on karate practitioners, not karate practitioners, about how best to live life? How would you try to encapsulate that if you could?
Right. And it's influenced by a lot of things. So I won't be, too long-winded on this, but I think live your life as simply as possible. The possessions possess you if you accumulate too many and attribute too much value to that. I see that in hospital settings all the time. The billionaire and the impoverished individual who have a stroke face the same path to recovery. One might have more resources, but they still have aphasia, they still have paralysis, they still are dealing with existential issues. Possessions don't change that. What changes, and what seems to be important to me, and as a older man, is that you're a good human being. And that as a martial artist, I really listen to what Sensei has told us. And that is you cut yourself first, meaning you sacrifice first, the samurai tenet. You cut yourself before someone else. You sacrifice so that someone else doesn't have to. I'm going to sit. I'm going to stand while you sit. I'm not going to eat or drink until you drink or eat. And I'm going to serve as opposed to take. And I think that's an okay way to live. That if we all commit to taking care of someone else before us, then and sacrifice for someone else, I think the world would be a better place. Second thing is we can't really know another human being Or judge them. I have positions that differ with other people, but ultimately, I don't really know that person that has a different opinion than mine. So I have to be really careful about judging them, because ultimately, most people, there's a few exceptions, are just trying to do their best. And most of their reactions come from a place of fear, from what I've seen. So I think we have to be loving and understanding, strict, but try to be loving and understanding as you live your life.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful, pure joy having you on the podcast. I'm glad we were able to do this, and finally got a chance to really meet you somewhere other than, with Guise, with you screaming and yelling at me all the time. Just joking. I know this will be very inspiring to many people to watch. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. And please stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our talk with Dr. Dave Lechuga. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mortylevine@gmail.com, or visit mortylevine.com. Remember, it's not what you think.